Hi, this is Congressman Jeff Fortenberry calling you from Washington, D.C. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining this telephone town hall tonight. Again, this is Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, and what I'm hopeful to do with you is spend a little bit of time talking about agricultural issues. You may recall that a couple of weeks ago we had planned for an agricultural farm bill review session in Norfolk, but we got snowed out. So those of you who received an invite by mail or who were intending to come, thank you so much for your patience. We did try to reschedule that, but again, weather has conflicted with planning, and so we've not been able to do that. So I wanted to go ahead and give you a call, though, to allow you to dialogue with me and a very special guest that I have tonight. Undersecretary of the USDA, Bill Northey, is with me. Bill is a farmer from Iowa. He is the Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation. He has an interesting background, both as a soybean and corn farmer. Former president of the National Corn Growers, was Iowa Secretary of Agriculture, and 1 year ago today left Iowa to serve the country in a different way by becoming Undersecretary and was confirmed into office a year ago today. So he has responsibility as Undersecretary for the Farm Service Agency and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, as well as the Risk Management Agency. So, Undersecretary Northey, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, this is Congressman Jeff Fortenberry calling from Washington, D.C., and this is a live telephone town hall for the farm community, for you who are farmers and producers or are participant in some way in agricultural production. We're really grateful that you're taking the time to talk tonight. What I wanted to do is just give you a little bit of background of where we are in the Farm Bill process, and then we'll stop and take your questions unless the Undersecretary would like to give a few comments as well. But last year, many of you are, of course, aware that we did pass another Farm Bill, a very important piece of legislation for the well-being of America. The Farm Bill is essentially about one thing: food security. And you in the ag community feed America and you feed the world, and it's just a real privilege to be able to represent you and those values in Washington, D.C. So to get the Farm Bill done is always an arduous process. There's a lot of trade-offs, and there's two primary components to it. It's basically the risk management side, again, providing the tools so that you can weather the storm, so to speak, and smooth out the vagaries in the market and the production process, as well as deal with the contingencies of weather. And the second part is also about food security in a different sense, that we help protect those who are in vulnerable circumstances through our nutrition program. So it becomes a very big bill in the end, and I've gotten a new assignment in Washington. I am now what's called the ranking member of the House Agricultural Appropriations Subcommittee, with responsibility for implementation of the Farm Bill, as well as oversight responsibilities for the Food and Drug Administration. So I'm proud of that. We've already gotten underway for this year's budgetary cycle. We just came through a pretty tough period here with the government shutdown, but got that figured out and we've moved on. So we've already moved into the next budgetary cycle. With that, again, our job right now is to figure out the funding to implement the Farm Bill. And what I'd hope to do with you tonight is avail you of the opportunity to ask me or the Secretary any questions that you might have, either from interactions that you're having in terms of your own program participation, particularly with the Farm Service Agency or the Natural Resource Conservation Service or the Risk Management Agency, or anything else you'd like to ask regarding the trajectory of ag policy in the country. I did have the privilege this week of being with Secretary of State Pompeo. He was at the World Food Prize headquarters in Des Moines and invited me to come and listen to his speech to the Iowa Farm Bureau. We had a couple of Cornhuskers there, though, that were allowed in, and he gave a good speech. Again, part of the mission there was to help our country better understand the work of the State Department, but particularly as it intersects with food security, a big, big part of the diplomatic world and our humanitarian efforts worldwide to create the conditions for stability involves food programming. So it was a privilege to ride back with the Secretary to D.C. and to have a little bit of time with him where we talked about a variety of things. But I was really happy that he decided to make this launch of the Secretary's domestic tour, if you will, in our part of the world. So it's a privilege to be with him. With that said, let's now go to your questions, unless Undersecretary Northey wants to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Appreciate the the invitation to be with you both in Nebraska, which didn't work out yet. Look forward to potentially getting there, but to be on tonight with some of your constituents. Glad to be able to answer any questions. As the Congressman said, I'm from that part of the world. Northwest Iowa is home, Spirit Lake, Okoboji, so certainly neighbors, and would look forward very much to getting back, thinking of you all going through the challenging weather situation. My job here is to manage the three agencies. We have about 20,000 folks across the country, about 10,000 in FSA, 10,000 in NRCS, the Balance and Risk Management Agency. We're working hard to be able to get those Farm Bill programs delivered so that you can take advantage of that Farm Bill that the Congressman and his colleagues passed in December. That's our next stage. We have about 2,500 offices for NRCS across the country, about 2,100 FSA offices as well. So we have a lot of folks out there. We need to get trained up and some software too, and we'll get them ready to work with all of you in delivering those farm programs. So glad to be here with you this evening.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're grateful for your service. And let me just remind all of you, if you aren't aware, if you'd like to ask us a question, you press 0 on your phone, and we'll put you in the queue, and we'll be happy to take your question. One thing that the Secretary of State was asked about, and if Secretary Northey would be interested in dialoguing on this, and I had a very interesting conversation last night with the Japanese ambassador regarding the possibility for bilateral negotiations there. I think they're very, very strong. Clearly, that would be very helpful to our beef exports.
Absolutely.
If we can get something resolved there. Australia's got a better deal than we have. I think the Japanese are very eager to potentially enter into a bilateral trade agreement with us, and that would be pretty helpful. And Mr. Secretary, you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I sure would. Certainly Japan is an awful important market for us. Those of us in the Midwest know what a great buyer of grains and meat they are. Certainly beef. They typically are our number one in total dollars purchased of beef. And we are at a disadvantage now as Japan has had some trade deals with some other countries. I think they are eager. Certainly, Trans-Pacific Partnership was one of those potential ways to be able to build that relationship. I think there's opportunities to be able to mirror some of the advantages that would have given us in some opportunity to be able to do some trade now. And so I think the administration, it's a very high priority. Of course, be able to look at USMCA and China as well. But looking forward, the opportunity with Japan and to be able to grow that market, a country that's already very friendly and already is very happy to purchase a lot of U.S. products, I think offers a real opportunity for us.
Great. Well, good. Yeah, that was one area that was discussed with the Iowa Farm Bureau as well as many others. Again, if you'd like to ask us a question, just go ahead and press 0 on your phone, and we'll get you in the queue. And let's go ahead and take a question now, Mr. Secretary. Hi.
Hello, Mr. Undersecretary. We in Nebraska have been part of a couple states that were found to have our HEL program run a little differently than the rest of the country. NRCS has been working with producers in Nebraska to try to change that a little bit. But my question comes down to the enforcement of that. Producers have been given 3 years to come into compliance with that program. And because of that, though, as we all know, it's not going to the warnings and everything that NRCS has provided Nebraska farmers, not everyone's probably going to be in compliance in 3 years. So my question is there any opportunity for us to make some changes to that to where after a few years, after this initial 3-year period is over, can we extend that for producers who maybe have been following the rules, doing what they've been supposed to be doing per NRCS guidelines? Now this has changed. Can we provide some sort of extension for folks give another year of compliance. You have a year to come into compliance if you're found after this initial 3-year deadline to not be in conservation compliance. The loss of crop insurance that this now possibly could trigger is a big deal. And so I just was curious if there's any possible movement we could make on that.
Hey, that's a great question. You're on the caller ID here. It came up as unknown. So can you give me your first name and tell me somewhat where you're from? That'd be helpful to us.
Jordan from Southeast Nebraska.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jordan. Go ahead, Mr. Secretary.
Well, thank you, Jordan. It's a challenge to be able to manage a farm in all different circumstances. We had sometimes you'll get large rainfalls and small rills of erosion, and that can look like a producer's not doing everything that they need to do. I'm hoping, certainly love to be able to hear if you have different experience, but I'm hoping your local district conservation is working with you, that you have a plan that is certainly possible to follow. You're following that plan. I think for the most part, when producers are doing all the things they can do, we recognize that there's unique weather circumstances that make it hard for almost any plan to be able to completely prevent some of the things that can happen on a farm. So I'd love to be able to hear it directly. Certainly, I hope you're working with your local conservationists or the state conservationists. We've tried to make sure that folks are dealing with this consistently, and we've gone through some training for some folks, and to be able to make sure that they're doing the right kind of thing to be able to work with producers. So certainly be glad to be able to have you get a hold of us at USDA and have those conversations, and I'd be glad to engage personally on it.
Jordan, does that
perfect.
help?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for your question. Let's now go to Ken. Ken, you there?
Hello.
Hi, Ken, you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, good evening.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, my thing is I've been farming for about 60 years, and I look around. I have no neighbors left anymore. They're all big farmers, and the young guys want to get started. They haven't got a chance. They can't rent any ground, and I think it's all kind of a farm program because they get big payments, and then they'll turn around and buy another farm. And here we are with a small payment yet, a small farmer, and can't compete, and it's pushing us right out of business. And
Ken, do you mind
telling
me the size of your farm? Do you mind telling us?
Well, it's over 400 acres, but part of it's pasture. And
yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, so
well,
that's
go ahead, Mr.
my point already. It seemed like they get big payments and they can make it go, but it's fine to have something when we dry out and such as that. But I don't see why all young guys they haven't got a chance to get started farming.
Yeah, it's a challenging time, especially with the prices where they're at right now, certainly the expenses as well. It's a very challenging time, whether you're established or not. But a young guy just doesn't have the equity to fall back on when we're running into these lower prices. So, as you say, our payments that mostly just kick in when we have low prices, whether it's ARC or PLC payments or crop insurance payments, we don't have direct payments that come no matter what anymore. Those went away a while ago. So the fact that we are having some payments is a representation of the challenging economic time that it is. And they are based on how many acres you have. If you have a few acres, the payments based on those acres. If you have lots of acres, and your payments based on the per acre, and certainly the losses are shown to a greater degree on those larger farms as well. We are seeing some new farmers in some areas. We certainly saw some that popped up when we had better prices a handful of years ago. Those are under stress right now. We're seeing it, all producers going in some stress. But where we see successes, where the beginning farmers are doing something different than the other farmers sometimes next door. They're doing some direct marketing. they're managing their operation, they're maybe selling some beef directly off the farm, doing some other niche kinds of activities in addition to growing their commodity business. It's really hard as a brand new farmer with no equity to be able to compete against somebody who has been in the business for 40 years and have several generations. Often we see as well young farmers starting with families, and that's been a way most of us had a chance to be able to get started. We continue to see a few farmers being able to do that. We have some beginning farmer loans, some offsets on participation in some of the program activities where the congressman and others have provided us an opportunity for under-resourced or beginning farmers to pay lesser fees to be able to be involved. And so we're trying to do some things to every extent that we can to be able to help those beginning farmers get started. We need them. We absolutely need them. You're right.
Yeah, that's right, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Ken, for the good observation. And it is a difficult question because obviously there's some consolidation. And they're
on a farm, but they just don't. They can't rent any ground. We got the machinery, but can't rent any ground, and they can't afford to buy it either.
Yeah, let me emphasize something the Secretary did say. I think the agricultural family is expanding. It's interesting that in the agricultural college and at the university, the number of students going in is growing, but it's not necessarily all oriented toward traditional production agriculture. The entrepreneurial space with value-added production is growing significantly, and many young people are interested in the convergence of environmental science and conservation as well as agriculture production and or international development. But with that said, the Secretary is right. What we try to do in the Farm Bill is provide some additional assistance, recognizing the problem that you're rightfully pointing out to beginning farmers and ranchers to help smooth the pathways to entry into the business. In addition to that, we have value-added grant program that for those who may never be in a position to acquire land themselves but do want to participate in the agricultural family and make things with their own two hands, this is another way in which young people are entering the field. In fact, we just had a great dialogue with a number of younger people, and there was a gentleman who was actually older who's from your area in the Butler County area who's doing some interesting, innovative things with a specialty crop. And anyway, they just showed great enthusiasm by adding value in the value chain, but putting that value in their pocket by diversifying traditional farm operations, but using social media and new types of products from hops to whiskey and direct marketing of beef that are showing real promise to, again, expanding the ag family. But there's no getting around what you pointed out. It's just tough to enter the field. But thank you, Ken. It's a great observation. We appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the next question, but I really appreciate your time. If any of you are interested in asking a question, please go ahead and press 0 on your phone, and we'll get you in the queue here. Again, press 0 if you'd like to ask me or the Secretary a question. Hi, Chad, are you there?
Yeah, this is Bob from Saunders County here.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah, I've got a couple of issues here, and I'll be brief here. I've got some land here, approximately 5 acres, that are farmed wetland, and I cannot lay tile on it. We're paying $65 to $115 an acre in taxes, in the property taxes in Nebraska. This particular piece of ground maybe has some frogs. There's never turtles there. There's never ducks. There's never any geese or anything like that. And I need to make this land productive so that I can pay the expenses on it. I've talked to people in other states. They have no trouble putting tile in a farmed wetland as long as they don't drain it onto another landowner. Also, I see big differences between NRC offices on how they treat these farmed wetlands, what you can do with them. And that's one of the issues that I'm facing out here. I talk to people in other offices. I drive around to other counties in the area, and I see that they're draining some of these farm wetlands, and why we can't in this county. The second thing that I want to visit with you about is CRP. We need more CRP acres here. With Saunders County priority went down in the last, I think, farm bill as far as what land can be put in the CRP. And whoever made that determination, western Saunders County, the west third is very high sloping land that can erode very easily. And then also our pheasant population has dropped down considerably. Here you don't see any pheasants anymore unless just a patch of CRP, and we've lost all of that. So those are the two things that I have problems with, and I don't know what the answer is or if anybody can help me out on them.
Hey, Bob, this is Jeff Fortenberry again. I'm going to let the Secretary answer your specific questions on the wetlands and then the increase in CRP that we did put in the Farm Bill. But I jumped 8 pheasants recently. Unfortunately, they weren't in Saunders County. They were way, way out west. But that was kind of exciting because I hadn't seen one in a while either. But go ahead, Mr. Secretary, on the wetlands question.
Sure. On the wetlands, so if it's farmed wetland, the Congress has not allowed us to let you tile that and retain your benefits for farm programs. So you can certainly tile it, but that means you won't be eligible for farm programs in the future, and that should be true in those other counties as well. So maybe there are some areas that look wet that were not declared wetlands. Those certainly, if they're prior converted, they can be tiled, and you can have additional drainage go into those areas. But if it's really been declared a farmed wetland, you are not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to have you participate in farm programs in the future. We're trying to make sure that there's consistency in the way that everybody measures that and looks at that, and there are several criteria that go into that designation.
My question is, what are we trying to accomplish by not allowing tiling? Because, like I said, I'm not destroying any nature really there. I mean, there's never a duck sitting on there. There's never a turtle there or anything. So, I mean, you think we could be able to distinguish between parcels that maybe will preserve wildlife or what have you? Because I can't really see where we're really preserving anything or what the intentions are of not allowing this to happen. You see what I'm saying?
I do, and that's a real challenge when you have areas that are different. And obviously, even dry years and wet years, it can look different out there. You have a wet year, it may look a lot more like a wetland than in a dry year. But the criteria that was set up in not further draining a farm wetland, you can still farm it. You know the challenges of doing that in a wet year. You'd like to be able to tile it. But the way the law is, you can't take additional drainage to obtain your benefits. There are other options. We have some folks that have decided to put that area, you mentioned CRP, or other conservation easements, whether it's a local easement that can be paid for or through the NRCS. We have some folks that are coming forward and saying, I've got a sandy knob, or I've got a low area that I'm not getting very good crop out of. I'd like to be able to get something more for that, because, as you mentioned, it still costs you money for your taxes. What are some of the options out there? Sometimes that doesn't work because it's in the wrong spot. You don't want to have to farm around it for the rest of your life, and so you'd rather farm it on dry years and drive around it on wet years. But there are times that you can create some real value through easements. Let me mention CRP as well. You asked about CRP, and previous farm bills had seen CRP acres decrease long ago. It used to be 36 million acres. The farm bill before this one was 24 million acres. So as you say, a lot of acres have gone out of CRP. Congress this time added some acres of CRP, up to 27 million acres by 2023. So it's going up. We have about 1.5 million acres right now of room. We have some land coming out of CRP as well. So we project come November, December, probably December, we will have a CRP offering, general enrollment CRP, available for folks to be able to bid into. So putting all the rules together to do that. You probably have heard as well, Congress did say we don't want CRP to compete with local land rental rates. So there is a cap on those rental rates. It must be no more than 85% of the county's rental rate. If it's in general enrollment, no more than 90%. If it's in continuous enrollment, and then the reofferings, if you're offering a piece of ground again, then that limitation goes down a little farther, another 10% down.
Yeah.
There will be offers offered, and we are now required every year to make sure that whatever is available, we have a new CRP sign-up each of the years of this next farm bill.
Yeah, one thing I will say, Saugus County got lowered as far as the ranking for getting CRP, and I don't know why that happened, because whoever made that determination isn't considering the land that is in this county that can erode, or the slopes that we have. So I don't know who changed the ranking, because that's what they told me at the FSA office also. The ranking of Saugus County was lowered as far as being eligible to put in the CRP.
Okay, that's something that. Thank you, Bob, for that observation. I appreciate. This is Jeff again. I appreciate knowing that. I'm going to ask the secretary if he'll look into the reasons for that.
Okay.
I wasn't familiar with that, so I want to do that. And by the way, regarding CRP, that was one of the things that I was supportive of increasing those base acres. I thought it was very important. I thought it was a bit low, and even supported higher than we got. But I think it's an important. It's hard to know the exact balance, but I thought it was too low, and we needed to go higher. So.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I appreciate it.
Yep. Bye.
Let's now go to Kristen. We'll talk to Kristen, and if any of you again want to ask a question for me, Jeff Fortenberry, or Secretary Northey, please go ahead and press 0 on your phone. And by the way, I'm always available to you. You can go to my website at fortenberry.house.gov and send in an email question from there, or call us. We have offices in Lincoln and Fremont and Norfolk. And I'd like to offer you something too. Please sign up for my Fort Report. It's a weekly email that we do. Put quite a bit of work into it to try to address the dynamics in Washington each week, policy issue that might be relevant, or just some broader trajectory of ideas as to where the country is going. That's the Fort Report, and if you go to the website, fortenberry.house.gov, I'd love to include you on it. Let's now go to Kristen. Hi, Kristen. Kristen, you there? Okay. All right, we'll try someone else. Kristen, one more time. You there? Hello, Kristen? All right, let's go now to the next person. Hi, this is Jeff Fortenberry.
Hi, this is Julie from Dodge County. And it's my understanding that the Farm Act exempts CAFOs from the CERCLA and EPRA requirements for reporting emissions. And does this mean that we're wanting that governance to go to local government, like the county level? Because CAFOs can often have industrial strength emissions of hydrogen sulfide and ammonia.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Secretary will answer your question.
Yeah, I'm not sure on the particulars around the reporting requirements. I know that historically, certainly, the regulation of livestock facilities are done at state levels rather than the federal level, but there had been some creep of some of the EPA authorities, I think, in many people's mind, into some reporting requirements that really were not about health and safety, but were about industrial kind of actions around livestock operations. I don't know what Congress did in that. That's not something I paid as much attention to. We certainly can figure that out, and I'm sure the congressman would like to be able to address that. We'll figure out what the Farm Bill does say about that.
Julie, would you do a favor for me? Would you put that in an email to me, and we'll have.
Sure.
We'll take another look at it for you. In fact, Alan Fireherm is from your area. He's originally from West Point. Has been on the Hill a long time, has deep expertise in ag policy. But if you'll put that in an email to us, we'd be happy to take a further look at it. or maybe the Secretary can help us as well.
Yeah, we'd be glad to.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I'd really appreciate that because, as you know, nitrogen in the waterways in Nebraska is really high, and we need to guard our groundwater and drinking water since so many farmers have wells, ground wells, and we need to watch the nitrogen in the water. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Again, if you'd like to ask us a question, go ahead and press 0 on your phone, and we'll try to get to you. And again, I'm Jeff Fortenberry, your congressman, calling you from Washington, D.C., with Undersecretary Bill Northey from the USDA, who was kind enough to join me. Again, I've got to apologize to all of you. We sent you a notice that a couple weeks ago we were going to try to get together in Norfolk, but we got snowed out, and then today we were delayed again. For a variety of reasons. Sometimes I can't control my own schedule. We were voting on the floor of the House of Representatives. In fact, if you hear a little bit of echo in the background, I'm right off the floor of the House of Representatives in a side room where we rigged up the system here to be able to call you back home. So, but we're really grateful again for the opportunity to be with the Secretary and for all the hard work. Right now, again, as you're getting ready to plan ahead for the year, please know that we are available to answer any questions you might have about your interactions with the Farm Service Agency or NRCS or the Risk Management Agency. And it's been a real pleasure to get to both meet and chat with Undersecretary Bill Northey. Anything else you want to add, Mr. Secretary, in regards to what you're seeing? I think we could touch a moment on the dynamics of the trade negotiations that are going on. I'll give my own perspective because I've met both this week, both, as I mentioned earlier, with Secretary Pompeo, who commented particularly on the possibility of a bilateral trade agreement. And again, I was with the Japanese ambassador last night. I think there's a real eagerness for that. Obviously, the news is being consumed by the renegotiation of both NAFTA as well as the President Trump's team, direct negotiation with China. I think that the movement toward a United States-Mexico-Canadian trade agreement is well underway. I think we've got reasonable momentum on that. It looks to me that the deal that has been put together is a reasonable shift from what we had before, and I know this has some impact on producers back home. The China issue is a little more uncertain. The reality is we've got a huge trade surplus, or trade deficit rather, with China. A lot of very unfair practices by that country. Again, a significant portion of soybeans particularly, but also corn going to them, and I know this is important in terms for a number of you. Unfortunately, still some uncertainty as to how that's working out. I ask for your patience. I know you all are good Americans and want the best possible deal that America can get. The Chinese also know how our political system works. And the longer they can hold out, the more they can put internal pressure on us because of the dynamics in farm country particularly, but also with the tariff situation. They know that that's a better negotiating position for them. I do think some things are coming to a head. I mean, March 1st was an initial deadline. That's been extended. The president delayed certain tariff implementations to give the Chinese some space. They've also indicated that they were willing to buy more commodities. I think that is likely to be the outcome of this, but that is an easier place to be than the harder things we're asking them to do, frankly. And that's basically enforcement of their unfair practices by which they steal intellectual property or they demand when you're in partnership with them trade secrets, in effect, in order to be able to get product into their country or to manufacture in their country. So these are thorny issues, and obviously agriculture's entangled up with it. Is that a fair assessment, Mr. Secretary?
It's a wonderful assessment. Of course, having the opportunity to be able to hear from the Secretary of State, and I think Ambassador Branstad was there as well. I have a hard time not calling him governor because he was my governor for a long time in Iowa. And I do think that there is a great interest, and even on the Chinese side, of trying to get to a conclusion here sooner rather than later. But I think it was an awful important thing to be able to take on. And from the ag community, we all know trade is important to us. And it's because we're so darn productive in this country. that folks in the United States don't need to worry very much about their food. We have to worry about places to be able to make sure we move it so that we can have a profitable agriculture, and we need trade to be able to make that happen. We have some products that China was buying readily. Certainly soybeans was one of those, pork, some dairy products as well, but we also have some other products that they weren't buying much of. They were buying a little bit of corn, but not near as much as what they should be buying. They bought a little bit of beef, promised us they were going to buy a lot of beef, and haven't been buying as much as what I think they ought to be buying. They haven't been buying rice, and they haven't been buying poultry products. Those are all products, whether we produce them next door to us or not, they influence the ag economy in this country. And it's important to gain access in those products, as well as some of those other areas that we hear about, intellectual property and other kinds of things. It's complex, but I sense some momentum. I'm not close to it to know exactly what's going to happen. Certainly hope USMCA gets supported here soon, and we see a return to a non-tariff situation where our products from the Midwest can easily get to Mexico. Certainly there's a lot of corn that ends up in Mexico from Nebraska. Unit trains going down there to feed livestock in Mexico, as well as meat products that end up going that direction. And then the opportunity with the Japan, as you mentioned, and the Secretary talked about. There's a lot of effort. It's important to agriculture. You all remember, and we've got a few folks finishing up their market facilitation program payments. That was a system that was put together out of USDA to respond to producers that were especially hard hit by the tariffs. And so we put together a program that bought some products that didn't go overseas, that created some long-term marketing opportunity, as well as paid checks to producers that were being impacted. Not perfect, certainly not compensate for all the loss of these markets. But we, I believe, are over $8 billion in payments out to producers. I think it was an acknowledgement by the administration that there was a lot of pain out there, that trade is important to agriculture. And I think that same kind of acknowledgement is why they're pushing so hard to get to an agreement, a good agreement, an agreement that gains the things we should be able to gain. It's not going to be perfect at the end of the day. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's certainly not going to be perfect. But I think, like USMCA, it can be better than what we had. And I think that we're seeing some opportunity for progress there as well.
Mr. Secretary, I think that's a great assessment. Whatever we end up with will not be perfect, but the issue had to be confronted. I'm supportive of the administration, the President's willingness to tackle this again because of the economic dislocations that have occurred, and these things needed to be updated. They really did. The situation with China is really thorny because of the vast, vast difference between what they take from America, what we give them in terms of imports or exports to them, and what we import from them. So it's just too big and too severe. And, of course, it's entangled with a lot of other considerations, national security considerations. China's projecting on the world what I call an economic nationalism. They find themselves in just feeding the machine of economic expansion. And this is in many ways how they conduct foreign policy. And, in fact, I'm in addition to being one of the leaders on the Agricultural Subcommittee on Appropriations, I'm also on the State and Foreign Operations. The head of the United States Agency for International Development tagged them with what he called predatory lending by going into many developing countries in the world and exploiting the conditions of tough governance, unfulfilled governance, if you will, broken governance, structural poverty, and setting up circumstances in which they are loaning money and building things, but these countries are not going to be able to pay it back, so they basically will seize the assets. So it's a really, really tough problem. We do need a friendly and authentic relationship with the Chinese. I am all for that. I've been there. I actually went to a manufacturing plant that was with an American car company who had two partner companies in China, and I asked their names, and they told me, and I said, who owns those companies? It's the government. So our way of doing business is not their way of doing business in many ways, and this has resulted in significant economic dislocations. With that said, two major economies, both in competition and in interlocked with one another. And it's important that we try to get this relationship right and reset while keeping an eye on the deeper intentions in terms of ever-expanding Chinese influence in the world. And at the same time, viewing them through the lens of history as an important culture who have a deep-rooted sense of who they are as a people, and a real sense of vulnerability because they have been invaded and wounded and taken over in parts. And so those things carry forward in time that get projected about their own desires to create a really strong nationalism. With that said, we don't think that their model of human rights, nor their projection of how their economy works, ought to be imposed upon other people. So we have to be very careful about this delicate relationship, as important as it is. So with that said, you've all been very kind to listen to us, and some reasonableness for optimism, a slight optimism, let's put it that way, in terms of momentum on the China question. I spoke with Ambassador Lighthizer, who's the President's point person on this week. He's tough. He's really tough. And he's a deep expert. He's been in that business for decades. And so I think we've got the right person in place, and hopefully, again, we'll see some conclusion to all this very soon. But I really want to say thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for joining me tonight. It's been a good conversation. Thank you all who have listened this entire time. I really appreciate your willingness to spend some time with me. Again, if you had a question, you didn't want to ask it publicly, go ahead and send me an email. Go to my website, fortenberry.house.gov, and while you're there, sign up for the Fort Report. We'd love to stay in touch with you. Mr. Secretary, I hope this doesn't offend you, but I'm going to end the call by saying go Big Red.
I can appreciate that.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.